How do you have a positive mental attitude?
Having a positive mental attitude is one of the most powerful things you can own as a human being. And I think that's a beautiful thing that anyone can get to. It's something that's earned. It's not something that's easy to attain. But how does one get there? I kind of figured out some major components within that kind of perspective. The first thing is really assessing yourself as a person and really understanding how you look at the world towards the outside and how you look at yourself. Meaning that you have two lenses. You have a lens to the outside world, but you have a lens to the inside world as well towards yourself. Those are really the main two components of what makes up your perspective. The second component is we put a lot of us put certain lenses in place, and it's hard to get away from those lenses. And what I mean by that, to the external world, we put the blame, we put the B in terms of blame perspective towards the world. And towards the inside, which is the internal perspective, we put the letter E that stands for excuses. So it's very important to understand that's how we generally and have a tendency to look towards the world. So when someone cuts you off, and what do you usually do? We usually have a blame perspective, meaning they're a bad person. We blame their personality or their character. And when we cut someone off, what do? I was in a hurry, or I needed to get somewhere real quick. You give yourself an excuse. You look at your situation and your context. But what we need to do, this is part two of really understanding how you work, is that second component is really flipping that. When you flip that, you give the world excuses. And it's good because you're looking at what the person's situation, not just their character. Now, you got to be careful there here too. It's not a blanketing statement. You got to be careful with what situation you do that in and to whom you are conducting yourself like that with. So you got to be careful with those two components. But if you flip that, you'll have a merciful perspective, meaning you'll judge the world a lot more lenient in terms of how you view it as a whole. That will keep your internal kind of feelings at bay, where you have a positive aspect towards the world. Now, when you look at the internal perspective and how you should view yourself, you shouldn't just blame yourself in terms of how you look at the world. So what you need to do is take that B and erase the bottom of it. If it's a capital B, erase the bottom of it and you get the letter R. And what happens there is that stands for responsibility. And when you take responsibility of everything that happens to you, when you look at yourself, when you look at yourself on the inside, and you take accounting for yourself, it's the most amazing thing in terms of maturity. Because what you're saying is nothing in this world can stop me. I'm responsible for everything that happens to me. When I take that line, when I take that lens and I look at myself in that way, I ultimately gain control. And when I gain control, what happens? I naturally feel happier. Because the locus of control effect in terms of psychology tells us the more control we have over our life, the more happier we are. So once you do that and you remove the blame perspective, you take the responsibility perspective, you will always have control of your situations and you will never feel like you lost yourself in any which way. That will maintain a positive state in terms of emotion. Now, when you do all these three, when you kind of understand the lenses, the external lens versus the internal lens, when you understand that, that's number one. Number two, when you flip that, give the world excuses and flip the B into an R and take the responsibility lens instead of the blame lens against yourself. And number three is now really removing that emotion, that those lenses will remove those emotions and will keep you in a positive, happy, more subtle state in terms of how you view the world. So those are some of the things that I do to really keep myself in a positive emotional state.